Tonight we are joined by Bryson Ridgway. So Bryson is a graduate of our Florida Alpha chapter at the University of Florida, where as an undergrad he was chapter president, Senate president, as well as UF's Leader of the Year in an undergraduate Hall of Fame inductee. After graduation, Bryson has served on the ABC as ABC president for over a decade and continues to serve on their board, all in addition to what has become an incredible professional career in real estate and private equity, where he has founded a number of companies along the way, lived and learned a lot of lessons that he will impart on you this evening, and we'll have a lot of time to ask questions back and forth. And we're very, very thankful to have him with us to share some of his lessons learned. So be ready to learn, to take notes, and to ask some questions as well. Bryson, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you for having us.
Hey, Sean, thanks for having me. Thanks for the great intro. And really, I always find the most important part about any intro is not what's said, it's what's not said. And here's what I mean by that, because you're always wanting to take something away. For everything you hear on somebody's intro is something that they've done. The more important part is that they've endured a lot of failure, right? They've either been near failure or they've been at failure, but they were able to get to where they wanted to go because they had the courage to continue. One of my favorite quotes is from Aristotle, and he said that you will do nothing in life without courage. It really strikes me when I think about it. You will do nothing in life without courage. That's how important courage is. He said it was the most honorable attribute next to honor. So before we jump in, I just want to compel you that whatever you do in life, don't try to do it. Do it. You know, if you're going to do something, do it. Never give up. And if you do that, that's the difference between living a great life and a not so great life. We're only going to talk about, at least with me, two things, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A. And I have two questions for you to think about. Two questions to think about today, and to think about, how you think about the rest of your life, and to reflect on how it affects your presidency right now. The first is, what type of leader are you? Are you an ego-driven leader, or are you a principle-driven leader? The second question is, how well do you do leadership? Are you good, or are you great? So in answering what type of leader are you, right? Ego-driven or principle-driven? An ego-driven leader is really easy to pick out. There's someone that just cares about the leadership role because they care about the title. They care about the accolades, they care about the perks, the attention, whatever it might be. Here's the unique thing. Each of you are presidents. In the scheme of your undergraduate chapter, you have reached the pinnacle. And what you'll find is the ego-driven leaders are really easy to spot right now, because they're the ones that sit back and say, hey, I've done my time. I've done what I wanted to do. I might have a month left. Heck, I might have a new president that's been picked out. The ship is yours. It's your time. That's an ego-driven leader. A principle-driven leader is different. A principle-driven leader is driven by a purpose, and that purpose is excellence. Excellence for themselves, excellence for their organization, right? And the thing about excellence is, it's not a destination. It's a journey, right? You never get excellence is the pursuit of perfection. We are never perfect. Our organization is never perfect. If you or your organization is not growing, I can promise you, you are dying. So know how you can tell a difference between an ego-driven and a principle-driven leader? At the end of their term, right? The principle-driven leader is pushing to finish, to do great things, and to set up their organization for the next great climb. That's the difference between someone that leads for principles and someone that just does it for their ego. The next question is, hey, if you want to be a principle-driven leader, are you good, or are you great? A good leader gets people to believe in them. That's probably how you got elected. People believed in you, so they voted for you. So you're a good leader. A good leader can get some things done, but you are one person. You can do one or two things well. A great leader gets others to believe in themselves. A great leader gets other people to believe in themselves. Then they don't have one person, they have a team of people. A team of people outperform an individual every day of the week. That's what separates good from great. You might ask, how do I go about being a great leader? And there's two things. And somebody had mentioned it, had mentioned something about delegation, and there's some really good nuggets in there. There's two things if you want to be a great leader, right? First one is you need to empower people to take ownership of some components of a shared vision, right? You need to work on your shared vision, but you need to empower them to take ownership and give them the opportunity to be a leader themselves. That's the first part. The second part is you need to be along, you need to be support. You need to be along for the journey. There's two very important parts to every journey that you go on, right? The first part is starting. You have to have the courage to start. The second part is in every journey that's worthwhile, particularly in those where you're stretching to do something great, there's the risk of failure. There is the fact that you will face failure, and you very well might even fail initially. You need to be there to give people the resources so that they can get through those failures or skip off those failures and jump to the next win. You don't do that with status reports, right? Hey, let's meet every 2 weeks. Let me know where you're at in an Excel spreadsheet. That's different than being on that journey with them. You don't need to drive the boat for them, but you need to be on that boat so that you have a sense of what they need and when they need it, because it's important to keep momentum for them. So a great leader empowers others and gives them the support they need to get things done. So, as a recap, you need to decide what type of leader you want to be. Do you want to be an ego-driven leader, or do you want to be a principle-driven leader? You need to decide, do you want to be good, or do you want to be great? But know this, and we started with it, there is no such thing as trying. There is doing it, and there is not doing it. Every one of you have the ability to do anything that you set your mind to. The only thing that will stop you is you. Failure will only catch you if you stop moving your feet. And it's the same for other people. If you want to be a great leader, help motivate them to keep moving their feet forward, to keep pressing on. And if you believe in yourself and you believe in other people, they believe in you as well. And they start to believe in themselves. And you've become a great leader. So I'll close, and we'll open up to some Q&A, but I'll close by saying this: whatever you do, do not try, you do it. You set your mind to it, and you do it. You figure out where you want to go, what journey you want to take, and you make it happen. And that's really what I wanted to talk to you about finishing strong. So let's open the discussion up. Sean, I don't know how you want to structure it, but that's the essence of what we were hoping to talk about.
So for you guys, I wanted to build in more time to ask questions and to really understand and learn more about what is it that life looks like at the end of your term and what life looks like afterwards. So whether it's in the chat, whether it's unmuting, whether it's hitting the Q&A, you've got a couple options out there, but hit us with your questions. What things do you want to know more about? What questions do you have about the difference between principle and ego leadership? What are the things that you want to know more of?
I'll go. Hi there, Bryson. We actually met, that'll be Conclave almost like 2 years ago. We had one of those cool one-on-one sessions. I apologize, my video is not working right now, but I appreciate you coming out. It's good to see you. It's good to hear from you. I like those two types of leaders because I've always prided myself on the discipline of being a principled leader, and especially for future presidents in my chapter, I try to groom and educate to become a principled leader. But I feel like there's so many people, and it's just the reality of an undergrad fraternity chapter. Not everyone's going to be a leader, and that's really not a problem. But it is a problem when they aren't principled members necessarily. They can be ego-driven members, and so I feel like when I sit down with the two guys who I've really taken under my wing for future presidency next year. I go over what it's like to have discipline and how you ground yourself in things as simple as your values. But how do you humble a chapter? How do you make guys step back and think about being principle driven just outside of presidency? I feel like a fraternity is filled with generally winners, guys that have just inherent egos. How do you humble the masses?
Yeah, no, look, that's a great, and I do remember meeting with you. That's a great question. So there's a couple of things in there, and I'm going to pull out two topics to talk about. The first actually came to mind when I was reading some of these topics over here in the chat. There's certain things that you have control over, right? And there's certain things that you don't have control over, right? And so it's always important to focus on the things that you can have either more control or more influence on. So the first thing is to work with those 2 or 3 people. And by the way, it's not atypical that a bulk of the leadership or the manpower you need to do great things is collected in a small group of people. And they tend to be the busiest people too. The people that have the least amount of time are the people that are willing to give it. So my first point is, first you need to cultivate and maximize, the opportunity that you have to work with those 2 or 3 people that get it. They already get it, right? Because now you're not one person. Now you're 2, 3, 4, 5 people. And 2, 3, 4, 5 people, that's more persuasive and powerful than one person. Going back to that concept of a team always outperforms an individual. So that's part one. Part two is more challenging, right? I think the essence of the question is, how do you get to the the culture of the chapter? How do you change people that they fall on a spectrum of how much they care about either the chapter or how much they care about excellence or not, or what their priorities are. And I would tell you that is a really sticky issue. When I mean sticky, I mean that's hard to change. Doesn't mean it can't be changed, but it's not something that's going to be changed overnight, right? At one time, it's not something that's going to be changed by chastising people. That's the sort of thing that changes by having what I would call one-on-one conversations with individuals, getting to know them, what's important to them, and understanding why they see it a little differently. First thing's listening and understanding. And then the second part is having a true and open discourse about, maybe what an alternative course for both them and the organization could be. And because you're one person and you can't go talk, I'm from a chapter that was, between 120 to 150 men. So it's not practical to go speak to 120 to 150 men, but you don't need to. You need to talk to the 5 to 10 men that within that chapter of more people hold sway and can persuade other people, and other people look to them, right? And don't just go talk to the people that agree with you. Go talk to the people that have very different opinions than you, and truly try to understand them. So Ian, to wrap it up, first is, you need to have intimate one-on-one kind of hallway conversations with these people, get to know them as individuals, right? Get to know them better, why they feel differently, and have an open discourse. And then since you can't talk to everybody, selectively talk to people that are leaders within these opinion groups. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's that discourse that's crazy important. And I don't think it's realistic to set out to change the opinions of everyone, especially, we're at 110 members this year, the largest we've been in quite a while. And it really makes me think, because you know, in a place like a presidency, this will transcend into organizational behavior, you know, outside of college. But it seems like it's to a certain point almost a domino effect, or at least a potential effect, that if I can find my little, you know, my little group of people who I think are with it, I can go to the people that are with it and not with it. It's exponential from there. Thank you. You've given me a lot to think about.
Yeah, and look, I'll share this with you too, Ian. Like, this is actually just important for everything in life. It's so much less about what you say and so much more about what you do, right? And how you act. And that's why I say preaching to people just is not as powerful as you know, watching how you act and acting in what I would call a virtuous manner. And I'll leave this. This is related to the topic, but different. I often find that what keeps people from doing the right thing or good things is that they're focused on the short term versus the intermediate to long term. A lot of times when you think about society, they tell you not to do things by punishments. And they say, hey, if you do this, you will be punished immediately by getting this. The truth of the matter is not only is it likely that you'll be punished, but even if you weren't punished by doing something wrong today, I can promise you that halfway down the road and all the way down the road, it's going to cost you greatly. I really think that being moral and pursuing excellence is often more difficult in the short term, but pays huge dividends in the intermediate to long term. And that's not directly related to what you talked about, but it could be a discussion that you have with those guys.
Totally. My mind's kind of racing right now because you've given me a lot to think about, and it's stuff I learn all the time in my business classes, especially, you know, this new intrinsic motivation mindset. So thank you. Seriously, I appreciate it.
You got it. No problem.
It's a great question. What other questions do we have? I have one for you, Bryson.
Sure.
And actually, ready? Let's go to you. Did you just unmute there?
Did you say my name?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to ask, what do you think the role of a president, I guess it's kind of like self-explanatory, but what do you think the role of a president is when the next semester and the next president starts their term? In terms of like transition, what do you think the role is?
That's a great question. Give me 5 seconds to organize my thoughts here on that. So there's a quote that I love. The quote is that leadership is not in position, it's in action. Just because you're not the president any longer doesn't mean that you can't have just as, if not more meaningful of an impact on the chapter. Here's one way that you could do that. If you think about the civilization over, at least, I don't know how many recorded years of history, at least 5,000, right? It has progressively, by and large, gotten better. And the reason why we've learned more and become more sophisticated, right, is because we have built upon what previous people have done, right? It could be in mathematics, it could be in philosophy, it could be in politics, it could even be in what we're doing right now, the art of rhetoric. All of these things we have progressively built on, and we've learned from other people's mistakes. So if you want to ask me what one of the most important things you could do, even though you lack the position, but you still can take action, it is to leave with that next president the mistakes that you learned from, basically what not to do and what to do. And if you really want to go over and above, momentum in life is so important help them get some momentum on some of the most important things that they should be working on, because they're going to be drinking out of a fire hose right now. The last thing I would say about that, which is what Ian and I we had all spoken about a moment ago, it's not what you say, it's what you do. Just so that I believe in that. When I was chapter president and stepped out of the role, I continued to be involved. I think it was a balanced man steward, but I continued by being a part of the AVC, right? And then when I was on the AVC, I was fortunate that I had the trust of other members to be in a leadership role. And I just now, maybe a year ago, stepped back because I started a new company and realized I wasn't going to be able to give it 110%, but I am still on the board, and I took a role that nobody really wanted to take, right? So my point is I believe so much in that, Renee, that I have done it multiple times. And to tie it back into what Ian, what we were talking about with Ian a moment ago, about how virtue often leads to intermediate to long-term success. I can't think of a better thing for each of you than to remain involved in your chapter and then your AVC. And here's why. College is a microcosm of life. You are, in your early 20s, and you are in a leadership role where you are learning things that I promise you, I have met 50 and 60-year-old men who are presidents or executives. They have not learned it yet, right? Because they made their way up, over time, but they didn't learn the leadership, the communication, the strategy skills that you all have learned, over these last 4 years. Your opportunity to stay involved with your chapter and then with your AVC gives you an opportunity to continue doing that at a high level, even though you're in your 20s. Because more than likely, maybe you're more fortunate than me, but when I first came out of school, I had basically an analyst role, the most junior role at an investment firm. And I had it for 2 or 3 years. And then I had an assistant role, right? So my point is, you have an opportunity by remaining involved in your chapter and in your AVC to be developing true leadership skills so that by the time you're in your late 20s or your early 30s, you might have the leadership skills and talents of someone who's 40, 50, 60 years old. So to recap, Renee, it's not about position. It's about the actions you take, right? The most important thing you could probably do if you want a project, even though you should pick something that you're passionate about, could be helping them transition, learning from your mistakes, and getting them some momentum on the most important things for them to do. And lastly, the best part about it is it gives back to you because it's an opportunity to really hone the leadership skills that you've been developing over the last 3 or 4 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. That was very helpful.
It's a good question. Very good question.
Bryson, we have a question about failure. So to take courageous action, to step out and to try requires the embracing of the risk of failure. So when you're dealing with failure or the paralysis of potential failure, what advice do you have on approaching that? The question here comes from Steve Channels as well. So Steve, if you want to unmute, feel free to ask that question directly as well.
Hey, Steve.
Brother Ridgway, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good job, video here. I'm good.
Looking sharp.
So, yeah, you alluded in the opening remarks about the courage in the face of failure. But taking that courageous action does bring the risk of failure. So, what recommendation do you have the group for dealing with that failure to avoid feeling paralyzed in bouncing back, especially if that failure is public facing? In the context of the chapter, either in full view of the chapter or in full view of the e-board?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Let me think about that for a moment. There's some great quotes too that I don't know by heart that maybe I can send to Sean, and you'll love reading. In fact, I read them occasionally. So, I'll tell you this is just me personally. And Steve, I'd be interested in hearing what you think about this too, because I know that you've had similar experiences. For me, it's perspective. Think about this, and it blew my mind. And really, at the end of the day, maybe it makes me less courageous because I'm looking at it in a different way. Not trying to do something is automatically failing, right? I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that it is impossible to be successful in life without taking risk and without failing. And if you missed, if you didn't take risk and you didn't fail in your life, then you fail by default because you didn't do anything great, right? So my point is, you have nothing to lose, number one. If you don't swing the bat, you are never going to get a hit. You don't need to hit the ball every time. You just need to learn why you missed, so that the next time a pitch comes up, you have a much higher chance of hitting that ball. I'll share this story. And maybe failure is just so front of my mind because it's something that I've struggled with as a person throughout my life, right? I remember being, a kid playing sports, and this so dominated my mindset that in any sport that I played, I typically played a defensive role. And the reason why is because I was afraid to miss a shot. And I missed every shot that I never took, right? And the teams that I was on suffered because instead of thinking about when I did take shots, when they were forced upon me, instead of thinking about how I could make that shot, I was thinking about, what happens if I miss? Don't miss. And by thinking about failure, my energy, my focus wasn't focused on actually making it happen. So, I think my most important message would be that failure is only permanent if you stop. Right? If you don't stop moving forward, failure is temporary. It is a learning moment. Expect it to happen. And when it happens, like that swing of the bat, think about what I can do differently, what I can practice, what I can learn, what situation I can change, so that the next time a ball comes, I have a higher probability of hitting it. And if you do that enough times, you will start to hit a lot of balls. So don't fear failure, because by not trying, you fail by default. And number two, know that you are going to fail and that you need to learn something from it. So the next time you get that opportunity, you have a higher probability of success. The last part is don't stop until you win, right? So that's how I've looked at it. I wish that I had realized that when I was younger, to be honest, Steve. What do you think, Steve?
Well, I agree with you. I think it becomes challenging when you're facing your own demons. You're looking in the mirror and having that conversation with yourself. That's one dynamic. When you bring in to that that conversation other people who have a different set of views, who aren't necessarily aligned with you, who may be judgmental, it creates can create an emotional friction that can cause you to doubt or to erode at whatever confidence you might otherwise have had to push through that failure, especially if some of those people are people that you respect. Could be your a mentor that you had, it could be a parent, it could be, in whatever setting, someone that you greatly respect. People that you don't respect much, those are much easier to dismiss. So it's more the conversation that you have with yourself in the face of those external judgmental voices that can challenge you to continue to push through. I mean, I know what I do. I mean, we all have our own anchors and our own balance points. Born of experience, I obviously have a few miles behind me. I wasn't so confident and secure to push through those boundaries, 30 years ago. So that's why I, reaching out to you to see what suggestions you have for this group.
Steve, not only do you have miles, but you have altitude feet that you've climbed.
Fantastic. We'll take one more question, and then Bryson, will turn it over to you for some final thoughts before going out to our breakout rooms to further debrief this in smaller chunks. But one more question.
Sure.
Hey, Bryson, this is Adrian Galera from California Sigma Chapter. How are you doing today?
Great. How you doing, Adrian?
I'm doing good. I just had a quick question. So in regards to just like our chapter executive board situation, not too big of a situation, but we've kind of been planning for the whole year, I would say, end of the year, dating back to March when COVID happened. And obviously, as we all know, California has been hit pretty hard with COVID, and we've been a little bit more restricted in regards to what we could do. All our events have been virtual, so we had to switch our whole structure and operations to a virtual setting. But the team has adapted well. We planned accordingly. And because we planned accordingly, we are where we're at today, ahead than anybody else within our other IFC chapters. But it's getting to the point where we're almost at the finish line, and a lot of the team is getting a little bit worn out, because usually after the spring semester we would kind of have that little small break and enjoy the summer and then come back and regroup. But there was no break ever since March. And I know you talked a little bit earlier about finishing strong. What would be some of your thoughts and recommendation in regards to just keeping the team together and being that guy of like, hey, let's finish strong. We have a couple more months left, and making sure to just collectively making sure the team knows that, hey, like this is for the long run and not for short term.
Yeah, no, Adrian, it's a good question. In there, I heard that, you all have some fatigue, right? There's fatigue from, not taking, there's different types of fatigue, right? There's fatigues from not taking a break. And then there's fatigues from just maybe being fatigued with what you do because you don't love it as much, right? Or maybe the vision that you have isn't as appealing. And so, and this is something I probably like to think about more, but I would say this, I do think it's important to manage, you and your team's energy, right? Like you can't, you got to hit things hard, but you do need to recharge every once in a while. So make sure that you build in opportunities for the team to recharge, because you can't go 110%, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Life's about balance. But more often, I don't find that that's the problem. I find that honestly, just pure physical fatigue stops you from getting there, lack of sleep and all that. What ends up really happening is people get fatigued on what the vision is and where they want to go, and they don't feel as energized about it. And so maybe the best thing to do, Adrian, is to sit down and relook at the goals that you guys put together in March and say, hey, look, are there goals on here that we are energized about, that we feel passionate about accomplishing? Or are there goals on here that we think now are more important, or that we could do that would position us better in the future? And I think if you find the right shared vision, right, that people are passionate about, then the probability that you get fatigued is much less. I think Steve Jobs had said it. He had said, pick his, and this is actually applicable just generally to life. He had said, pick something that you're passionate about to do, because it takes a lot of time and energy. And often, this is Steve Jobs, what he found is that the people that were successful were doing something they loved, so they never stopped, they never quit, and so they were successful. Whereas the people that weren't doing something they loved, they lost the energy to see it through to the end. So maybe it's about, recharging, but more likely it might be about talking about, hey, what are the most worthwhile aims for us to accomplish that we're passionate about? And let's finish strong and make it happen. And by the way, I do think a worthwhile aim of, the old phrase of we stand on the shoulders of giants, to I think Renee's question earlier about talking about past mistakes and setting them up for momentum to accomplish great things. And maybe it's envisioning that the world does go back to more of a normal state in 2021. I don't know. But I would sit down and talk about that, Adrian, because people might be fatigued about the vision they had set in March.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, and also too, I was going to comment too, just the physical fatigue that you spoke about has now become essentially Zoom fatigue. I mean, even with your job, I'm sure, and then the setting that we're in, we're used to, as human beings, we're used to switching settings, but our home has now become our home gym. It has become our workplace. It has become our office, our meetings. It has become everything. So yes, the recharging was super important, and we were able to do that easily a couple months ago. But now the recharging station is that gap is so small, because if we're not on this Zoom call, we're in this other Zoom meeting for another thing. So that's the thing that we have to overcome is the Zoom fatigue as well.
Yeah. And hey, I tell you, Adrian, be careful about too many meetings. You know what I mean? Meetings.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
what I was talking about, not just in regards to chapter meetings, just talking about like
Just the
as a
environment.
whole, the environment of, you have your chapter meetings, and then you have your school meetings, and then you have your work meetings, and to balance all that, it's hard because everyone's using the same software and
I get it.
everyone's using the same amount of time.
Got it. That makes sense. I get that.
Hey, Adrian, if I can throw something your way, just it's been working really well for us because we feel that same mental fatigue up here in Reno. It's frustrating, man. And honestly, I'm not really sure what sort of protocols your city or your school has on gatherings or programming or anything like that. But get out of town for the weekend or maybe just a night. You know, we've already had 2 brotherhood retreats, and we just get outside of the town, clear your head, ask guys not to bring their laptops or turn off your phone for a few hours. And, you know, even just an evening with your guys gives you some mental reset, you know, lead some meditation, do some yoga, eat some food together, have a bonfire. Like that, I found, you know, far more effective than anything like, you know, just daily in bedroom meditation. You know, it's tough to clear an increasingly congested headspace, but that's been working for us really well. But I think it comes down to what you're able to do. You might be at the mercy of your school, but drop a line, man. I think we still have each other's phone numbers from Carlson, so seriously, don't hesitate. I'm here to help.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, of course.
Love that. Well, Bryson, do you have any final words of wisdom for us? And then we'll go into breakout rooms here.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if you could attribute wisdom and my name together and not chuckle a little bit. But look, I think the most important thing in life we started with and we ended on, which is whatever you end up doing, there's no trying, right? Set your mind to it and do it, and don't take no for an answer. Don't let any failure stop you. I can promise you that I have failed more than I have been successful, right? And I think Steve Channels will tell you the same thing. So don't be afraid to take risk. Have the courage. You know, think about Aristotle, and if you decide to do something, you do it. Don't try. Right? You guys are incredibly. Think about this. Keep things relative. Actually, we had opened with someone to say, "Hey, Bryson, how you doing?" And I said, "Good." And then I thought about it a little more. I was like, well, you know, from a relative perspective, I'm actually doing, you know, I'm doing really good, even though I feel like I could be doing a lot better. And I'll share this with you. You guys are incredibly talented, right? You are in college, right? So you're at a high level of educational attainment. You're part of, in my humble opinion, the best fraternity in the land, and you are a chapter president of a chapter in the best fraternity of the land, right? You have incredible skills and resources. There is nothing that you can't do while you're a chapter president and after graduation if you set your mind to it. And that's the difference, is you just need to set your mind to it and do it. So if there's anything you take away from this, it's just do it.